Adeobi sat quietly under the old mango tree in front of their compound. Her eyes were red and swollen. She had been crying again, like she always did whenever the pain became too much to bear. The dust from the dry ground mixed with her tears as the wind blew past her face. She didn't bother to wipe her face. She was used to this. From the outside, nothing seemed wrong with her life. She had a roof over her head, a family name, and she was not a beggar. But behind the closed doors of the family compound, Adeobi lived a life filled with pain, hunger, and loneliness. She didn't have a childhood. She didn't have peace. Her days were full of work. Her nights were full of tears. She had lived like that for as long as she could remember. Her story started the moment she was born. Her mother, Nena, died 3 months after giving birth to her. It was a sudden illness. One morning she was fine, and by nightfall, she was gone. Her father, Mr. Okonkwo, a young man at the time, was heartbroken. He had loved his wife dearly. People in the village used to say they were like sugar and tea, always together, always laughing. After the burial, Mr. Okonkwo became a different man. He was quiet, withdrawn, and often lost in thought. But one thing remained the same, his love for Adeobi. He held her close every night. Fed her with his hands. Sang lullabies until she slept. For a while, it felt like things would be okay. But the truth was, Mr. Okonkwo couldn't raise a baby alone. His job as a hospital security officer in the neighboring town took most of his time. He needed someone to care for his child while he worked to put food on the table. So, after much advice from his relatives and pressure from neighbors, he married again. Her name was Alice. At first, Alice acted like the perfect wife and mother. She was always smiling. She cleaned the house. She sang while cooking. She carried Adeobi on her back and called her, "my little princess." Everyone in the village praised her. "You're lucky, Okonkwo," they would say. "Not every woman will treat another woman's child this well." But deep inside Alice, something was brewing. A few years after the marriage, Alice gave birth to a baby girl, Ngozi. And that was when everything changed. From the moment Ngozi arrived, Adeobi became invisible in the house. Alice no longer called her princess. She became a useless girl, idiot, and useless thing. The love, the care, the smiles, all disappeared. Alice's real face began to show. She would wake Adeobi up by 4:30 a.m. with a hard knock on the door. "Get up. Go and fetch water before the sun rises." Even when Adeobi was just 7 years old, she was the one fetching water from the stream. She would carry heavy buckets on her small head, sometimes falling and scraping her knees. But nobody cared. She would come back crying, but no one asked why. Ngozi, on the other hand, slept like a princess. When she woke up, her bathwater was already waiting. Her breakfast was already served. She didn't lift a finger. She wore the best clothes and the finest shoes, while Adeobi wore oversized hand-me-downs and torn slippers. Every time their father came home from work, Alice would force Adeobi to wear some of Ngozi's neat clothes and apply powder on her face. She would act so loving, so sweet, calling her Ada in front of her husband. "See how our Adeobi is growing, my dear. She's such a good girl," she would say. But as soon as Mr. Okonkwo returned to work, the nightmare continued. There were times when Adeobi would return from school and find nothing to eat. Meanwhile, Alice and Ngozi would be eating rice and chicken in the parlor, laughing loudly. They didn't care that she was starving. They didn't care that she cried herself to sleep almost every night. Her only friend was a mango tree in front of the compound. Whenever Adeabi couldn't take the pain anymore, she would sit under the tree and talk to the air as if her mother could hear her. "Mama, are you watching me?" she would whisper. "Why did you leave me? Look at me now. I'm suffering." The mango tree became her secret comfort. She would lean her back against it and cry quietly so nobody would hear. The years passed, and Adeabi grew. She didn't grow up like other children. She didn't have toys or birthday parties. Her hands were rough from constant washing. Her feet were cracked from walking barefoot. Her eyes, however, told a different story. They were soft, calm, and full of questions. And her beauty, oh, her beauty was like a curse. Even in torn clothes and messy hair, Adeabi was breathtaking. Her face glowed like morning light. Her skin was the color of fresh honey. Her lips were full, her nose was pointed, and her eyes sparkled when she smiled. Those smiles were rare. By the time she turned 16, people in the village had begun to talk. "She's the most beautiful girl I've seen," an old woman whispered one day at the market. "Is that not Okonkwo's daughter?" a man asked his friend, pointing from a distance. "She looks like a queen." Young men in the village began to notice her. Some followed her to the market. Others wrote her letters. A few brave ones tried to talk to her. But Adeabi had no time for romance. She was too broken, too tired, too wounded inside. And worst of all, every compliment she received made life harder at home. Alice hated it. "Who do you think you are?" she shouted at Adeabi one day. "Because some foolish boys are looking at you, you now think you're something. Let me tell you, you are nothing." Ngozi was even worse. "They will use and dump you. No man wants a dirty house girl," she would hiss, laughing with her friends. The hatred wasn't just hidden anymore. It became open, loud, and aggressive. If Adeabi received a compliment, she was beaten that night. If someone gave her a gift, Alice would take it and burn it. If a young man came to their compound to greet Adeabi, he would be chased away like a goat. The jealousy was unbearable. And yet, Adeabi remained quiet. She didn't fight back. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't run away. She endured. Even when Alice poured cold water on her one morning just to humiliate her. Even when Ngozi slapped her in front of her friends and called her a bush girl. Even when she was forced to cook for the whole house after walking all the way from school with an aching stomach. Adeabi endured it all. She would often stare at the road, hoping one day her father would return and see everything for himself. But he never did. Each time he came back, it was the same old game. Fake smiles. Clean clothes. Powdered faces. Warm greetings. "Daddy. Daddy." Ngozi would scream and run into his arms. Alice would prepare special soup, set the table with the finest plates, and serve him with a smile. And Adeabi would sit quietly, pretending to be happy, swallowing her pain like bitter medicine. She was never allowed to speak. Never allowed to tell the truth. "Say one word," Alice would whisper to her in the kitchen, "and you will sleep in the bush tonight." And so, Adeabi remained silent. Her life was like a cage, beautiful on the outside, broken on the inside. Still, her beauty continued to shine, and that beauty became a threat. Ngozi had always believed she was the star of the village. She dressed like a city girl, wore shiny shoes, braided her hair every week, and walked like a fashion model. But still, the boys looked past her and saw Adeobi. This was a wound she and her mother could not heal. Jealousy turned to anger. Anger turned to hate. And hate turned to wickedness. One Sunday morning, after church service, an elder in the community stopped Adeobi on the road and said, "My daughter, I don't know you well, but I want to tell you something. You are special. Don't let anyone break your spirit." That was the first time someone had spoken kindly to her in months. She thanked the old man and walked away. But what she didn't know was that Alice had seen the conversation from afar. That evening, as soon as Adeobi stepped into the compound, Alice grabbed her by the ear and dragged her into the house. "So now you are talking to elders, and what did you tell him? You want to start disgracing me in public. Let today be the last time you stand and talk to a man on the road." She pushed her to the ground. Adeobi hit her back on the chair and cried out. But no one helped her. Not even Ngozi. In fact, she laughed. Adeobi crawled to her corner in the kitchen, curled into a ball, and cried silently. That night, as she sat under the mango tree again, she whispered to the air. "God, if you're there, please help me. I don't want to suffer all my life." She didn't know that life was already planning something different for her. Something she couldn't even imagine. The village of Umuse had not seen such excitement in a long time. News had spread like wildfire. Chief Madu's only son, who had been living abroad for over a decade, was finally coming home. Not just for a visit, but to settle down, take over his father's businesses, and most importantly, to marry. It didn't take long for the news to reach every corner of the village. From the old women at the stream to the meat sellers in the market, everyone was talking about it. "Have you heard? Chief Madu's son is returning next month." "Oh, my sister, I heard he's not just rich, he's the kind of rich that eats money for breakfast." "Please, forget it. I'm sewing 3 lace gowns for my daughter already." The women were preparing their daughters. Tailors had never been busier. Beads were being bought. Shoes were shining. Even girls who had never touched a cooking pot before were suddenly learning how to cook bitter leaf soup and pounded yam. Alice was no different. The moment she heard the news, her heart jumped. Chief Madu's son. Coming back to marry. She clapped her hands and turned to look at her daughter, Ngozi. "This is our chance. God has finally remembered us. Ngozi, you must be the one he picks." Ngozi, dressed in a short pink gown and rubbing oil on her legs, smiled proudly. "Of course, Mama. Who else is finer than me in this town? Me, that wear Brazilian wig and use iPhone." Alice's eyes sparkled with determination. She was ready to do anything at all, to make sure Ngozi became the next Lolo of Umuse. But one thing stood in her way, Adeobi. Even though Adeobi wore old clothes, even though she didn't own a phone or fancy slippers, her natural beauty was like the sun. It couldn't be hidden. And that was the problem. Alice knew that if Chief Madu's son saw Adeobi, it would all be over. All the expensive clothes she bought for Ngozi, all the perfumes and makeup, would mean nothing. So, she made up her mind. Adeobi must disappear. At least until the billionaire's son had chosen a wife. That very evening, Alice stormed into the kitchen where Adeobi was washing pots. "From today, you're not stepping outside this house," she barked. "No church, no market, no school, nothing. Adeabi looked up, confused. More. But why? Before she could finish, a hot slap landed on her cheek. Did I ask you to talk? Foolish girl. You think you can use your face to snatch what belongs to my daughter? Adeabi held her face and quietly went back to washing. Ngozi stood at the door, laughing. You think every beauty ends in marriage? Wait, let me show you who owns this village. From that day, Adeabi's life became worse. She was not allowed to go outside. She was not allowed to receive visitors. She was not allowed to even look through the window. Alice doubled her house chores. She scrubbed the floor till her knees bled. She washed clothes till her fingers cracked. She cooked, cleaned, and served food without eating. At night, when everyone was asleep, she would sneak out to sit under the mango tree. Her body would be weak, her eyes heavy with tears. And she would whisper into the wind, hoping her mother could still hear her. One night, while sitting there, she heard music coming from another compound. There was a birthday party. Girls her age were dancing, laughing, enjoying life. Adeabi hugged her knees and cried. I didn't choose to be beautiful, she whispered. Why does it feel like a punishment? But unknown to everyone in Umuse, something strange was happening. A short man, no taller than a child, had started coming into the village quietly. He wore simple clothes, often dusty from travel. He carried sacks and bags, and he walked with a slight limp. He introduced himself to people as Chijioke. He said he was a trader. He bought foodstuff, yam, palm oil, plantain, garlic, and took it to the city to sell. At first, nobody paid attention to him. Some mocked him behind his back. See this small man, they would whisper. Even our children are taller. Some refused to sell to him. I don't sell to strangers, a tomato woman said, wrinkling her nose. Others laughed openly. One boy even pointed at him on the road and shouted, Hey, look. It's a grown-up dwarf. But Chijioke never got angry. He just smiled and walked away. What the villagers didn't know was that Chijioke was not an ordinary trader. He was Chief Madu's son. Yes, the same billionaire's son they were all preparing for. The one they were hoping would arrive in a convoy of jeeps, with bodyguards and loud music. He had returned secretly. And he had disguised himself. His plan was simple. He didn't want to be welcomed with fake smiles. He didn't want a parade. He didn't want to choose a wife based on makeup and fancy dresses. He wanted to see the truth of people's hearts. He wanted to see who was humble, who was proud, who was kind, and who was wicked. So, he moved around like a poor trader. Observing. Watching. Listening. And everything he saw in Umuse shocked him. He saw how girls insulted poor people. How families rejected him because of his height. How mothers whispered into their daughters' ears to ignore him. He saw Alice once at the market, haggling over meat. She looked at him from head to toe and hissed. Poor man, she muttered. Ngozi passed him too. She walked past with two of her friends. One of them laughed loudly and said, God forbid. If that man ever greets me, I will bathe with salt. Chijioke heard everything. But he didn't say a word. Then, one afternoon, as he was buying yam from a farmer, he saw something from a distance. A girl. Walking slowly with a basket of cassava on her head. Her dress was torn. Her slippers worn out. But her face was like calm water on a sunny day. He was stunned. He turned to the farmer. "Who is that girl?" The man looked. "Oh, that's Adebi, daughter of Mr. Okonkwo. But she's suffering in that house, her stepmother hates her." Chijioke watched her walk away. His heart became curious. Over the next few days, he saw her again and again. Washing, sweeping, carrying heavy things. Always working. Never smiling. But there was something different about her. She didn't complain. She didn't show pride. She was quiet. Calm. Beautiful in a quiet way. And in his heart, Chijioke knew this was the kind of woman he had been searching for. A woman who had tasted suffering and still remained gentle. A woman who didn't need makeup to shine. A woman who had not been spoiled by wealth or comfort. He wanted to know more about her. But he needed a way to reach her. Then one day, while walking past their compound, he saw Alice shouting from the balcony. "You this Adebi. Lazy girl. Go and clean that toilet room before I flog you like a goat." Adebi came out of the house with her head bowed. Chijioke stopped and watched from behind the bush. The way she moved. The sadness in her eyes. The silence she wore like clothes. And right there, he made a decision. He would go and speak to Alice. He would ask for Adebi's hand in marriage. Not as the billionaire's son, but as a poor, humble man. Just to see what kind of heart Alice really had. It was a risky plan. Alice sat in her parlor, fanning herself with an old newspaper. The heat was intense, but the thoughts in her head were even hotter. Weeks had passed since the news of Chief Madu's son's return. The village was still restless. Mothers were still preparing their daughters. Tailors were sewing day and night. Hair salons were full. But there was still no sign of the billionaire's son. Alice was worried. She had done everything she could to prepare Ngozi. She bought her new lace gowns, expensive perfumes, handbags, and shoes. She even paid a teacher to coach her on how to speak posh English in case the son had foreign manners. But the longer it took, the more nervous Alice became. And then, as if heaven heard her worry, a strange opportunity came her way. She was at the market pricing onions, when she heard two women whispering. "That dwarf that comes here to buy foodstuff," one said, "he's looking for a wife. He said he wants to settle down." Alice's ears picked up the words like antenna. "Are you serious?" she turned and asked. "Yes. But nobody wants to give their daughter to him. They said he's too short. And besides, who wants to marry someone always covered in dust?" Alice said nothing. But her mind began to race. She thought of Adebi. She thought of all the attention Adebi had been getting. She thought of how she hated seeing her walk on the street and men turning to look. She thought of the fear in her heart, the fear that if Chief Madu's son saw Adebi, it would all be over. And suddenly, it all made sense. This was the perfect way to get rid of Adebi. She would marry her off to the dwarf. No one would suspect a thing. Everyone had ignored him. No one knew his true identity. And once Adebi was married off and out of the way, Ngozi would shine freely. Alice didn't waste time. The next day, she went searching for the dwarf, Chijioke. She found him at the end of the village, buying baskets of yam. "Good afternoon," she said, smiling. Chijioke turned, a bit surprised. No one in the village had ever greeted him warmly. "Good afternoon, Ma," he replied. I heard you're looking for a wife, she said, wasting no time. Yes, he replied. I've been searching. Well, she smiled wider, you don't have to search anymore. I have the perfect girl for you. My daughter. Beautiful. Quiet. Hardworking. Chijioke paused. Your daughter? Yes, she said proudly. Her name is Adebi. She's the one you always see sweeping our compound. Chijioke raised his brow slightly. I thought she was your stepdaughter. Alice waved her hand. Daughter, stepdaughter, it's the same thing. What matters is that she's available. He smiled gently. Why her? Alice looked around to make sure no one was listening. Then she leaned closer. Let me tell you the truth. That girl has been giving me problems. Many men have been disturbing her. She's bringing shame to my house. I want her to marry and go far away. Before she disgraces me. Chijioke's heart broke a little. But he nodded. All right, he said. If she agrees, I'll marry her. Don't worry, Alice replied. She will agree. That evening, Alice came home with fire in her eyes. Adebi, she screamed. Adebi came out of the kitchen, her face covered in sweat and ash. You're getting married, Alice said. Adebi froze. Ma, you heard me. A man has come for your hand. He's not wasting time. You're leaving this house next week. Tears filled Adebi's eyes. But I don't want to get married. Before she could finish, a slap landed on her left cheek. You don't have a choice, Alice shouted. You want to stay here and keep tempting men, Abi? Not under my roof. Ngozi was standing at the door, smiling wickedly. This won't sweet me, she said under her breath. Adebi cried for days. No one listened. She pleaded. She begged. She even wrote a letter she planned to send to her father, but Alice found it and tore it to pieces. You want to bring your father into this? She hissed. I will bury you before he returns. The marriage introduction was rushed. Alice didn't invite any neighbors. She didn't inform any family members. Just a quick drink sharing in the parlor with Chijioke, who continued to play his role as a humble, poor man. When the date was fixed, Alice did everything fast. Bought Adebi a second-hand gown. Made a cheap wedding card with no names. No one was allowed to talk about it outside. Adebi spent her nights crying under the mango tree. This is not how I was meant to live, she whispered. Mama, please, please help me. She didn't know that help was already on the way. Then, the wedding day arrived. It started like a normal day in the village. The sun rose slowly. Roosters crowed. Women went to fetch water. Children played in the sand. Alice was busy preparing for the wedding. She wore a bright red gown. Ngozi was shining in gold lace, her face painted heavily with makeup. Adebi was dressed in a plain white gown. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Her hands were cold. Her heart was heavy. Smile small, Alice shouted. Don't go and spoil things with your long face. She pushed Adebi into the chair and continued applying powder on her face. And then, it happened. Just as they were preparing to step out, the sound of cars echoed in the distance. Not one. Not two. But a long convoy of black and white SUVs and luxury vehicles. Everyone in the village stopped. People ran out of their homes. Children screamed with joy. Even the elders stood up in confusion. The cars drove straight into Adebi's compound. Alice ran outside, thinking it was a mistake. But when the first car door opened, and Chief Madu himself stepped out, her knees almost gave way. What is going on?" she asked, trembling. Then the next car door opened. And out stepped Chijioke. Not in his usual dusty clothes, but in a royal white suit. His shoes were shining. His wristwatch glittered. The villagers gasped. That was when Chief Madu raised his voice. "People of Umils, this is my son, Chijioke Madu. The one you've all been waiting for. He came in secret to find a woman with a good heart. And today, he has found her." The entire village stood in silence. Alice's mouth was open. Ngozi's legs began to shake. Chijioke walked forward, smiled, and said loudly, "I came as a poor man. I saw many faces. I was rejected, insulted, mocked. But one girl, one quiet, humble girl, stood out. Her name is Adebi. And today, she becomes my wife." Adebi couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her hands covered her mouth as tears flowed freely. It felt like a dream. But it was real. Chijioke walked up to her, held her hands gently, and said, "You deserve better. And I'm here to give it to you." Alice fainted on the spot. Ngozi stood frozen, unable to speak. The wedding was done that same day, right in front of the shocked village. Adebi was driven away in a luxury car, dressed in gold, her eyes filled with joy. As the cars disappeared down the road, the village began to whisper. Some were clapping. Some were shaking their heads. But one thing was clear, Adebi's life had changed forever. And as for Alice and Ngozi, they never recovered from the shock. They lived in shame, in regret, in pain. They had tried to bury a star, but instead, they helped it rise. And every time they saw a black SUV pass through the village, they were reminded of the wedding that shook Umils. Thank you for watching this story. Kindly share your thoughts about this story in the comment section below. Give this story a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so by now. Thank you, and remain blessed.